the Matt Laricy Project. This show is about all things real estate, business, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Each show consists of myself, Matt Laricy, a member of my team, and a guest. This week, the Matt Laricy team member joining us is John Paul. And John Paul, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Great.
And John Paul, I got to know John Paul because he actually was the buyer of a unit that I represented the seller on, and he was so wowed by the Matt Laricy Group's expertise, we should say, that you ended up wanting to work here. Is that kind of 150% correct or just 110% correct?
About 100%. 100% correct, yeah.
Okay, and you're 100% Italian, is that correct?
100% Sicilian, yep.
Is that the same thing as Italian, or is there a difference?
You know, just an ocean separates the two, but pretty close.
All right. Forget about it, though, right?
Yeah, forget about it.
Okay, and this week what we're talking about is why Chicago uses attorneys. It's kind of odd because most states are what we call escrow states, and people use the terminology like we've opened escrow, but Chicago, for some reason, is just something different. So this week, we brought in the legal expertise, the number one real estate attorney in Chicago, Mrs. Lisa Saul. Lisa, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for that introduction.
No problem. So, Lisa, how long have you been an attorney for?
I've been an attorney for about 17 years now. I've been in residential real estate for about 6 years.
Where were you before residential real estate?
I worked at a big firm, Mayor Brown, in commercial real estate.
And what would you do in like the commercial real estate aspect?
I would do all parts of commercial transactions, just huge purchase and sales, joint ventures, a ton of lending work also.
Okay, and what made you in general just want to become an attorney?
I took a political science class in college, and I thought that becoming an attorney was talking about current events all day.
Okay.
So that kind of led me to law school, and I always wanted to go to school in D.C., so I thought law school was a good choice.
So the scent of a woman isn't the thing that put you over, right?
No,
okay.
That's not it.
Okay, I'm not sure. So what made you want to jump from commercial real estate to residential real estate?
I was looking to change things up a little bit. I liked the more personal aspect of residential real estate, and I liked the start to finish. It was kind of a definite start date. You know, within a couple of months, you've concluded the transaction, much different than commercial real estate, which went on for a long time.
So you kind of liked a little bit more of the personal aspect and kind of, let's say, like the corporate?
Correct, and I love talking to people.
Does it make you maybe a little bit crazy, the fact that, like, at least in the commercial, I'm sure, like, it's more 9 to 5, and at, like, 7 o'clock you don't get much traction, whereas in residential real estate on Sunday at 9 a.m. you have to answer your email? Is that bad or good for you?
Well, you know, it's okay. People get very emotional in residential real estate, so you kind of need to serve as a therapist sometimes.
Why do you think that? Why do you think people do get them? I mean, I know John Paul, when you bought the place here, he was a very emotional buyer. Let me tell you, it was probably one of the most difficult transactions I've ever had. But yeah. Why do you think people get so emotional in this?
I think if you're a seller, you take things very personally, and you think your house is the best and it's awesome. And when people send you a letter, you know, maybe critiquing some things, you just get very upset and take it personally. On the buy side, you want to buy something that's perfect, and you want the seller to acquiesce to your demands, and that's just not always. They don't always match up.
Yeah, I think it's just like such a big process, and in people's minds, it just like builds up so much that everybody. I feel like sometimes in some certain transactions, everybody's always at each other's throats, and everything's so personal. And at the end of the day, like, most people are pretty cool if you just kind of take that layer off of everybody's kind of like egos a little bit as well. So, as we were talking about when we introduced the show, that, like, you know, Chicago is one of the only cities that kind of really focuses on attorneys. Why is it? Do you know why Chicago uses attorneys compared to other states?
I don't know why. You don't have to use an attorney in Chicago. Most people do. And I think even if you start out saying you're not going to use an attorney, you end up using an attorney. This differs than, you know, escrow-only states where an independent third-party escrow opens up title and manages the whole transaction.
They call them like ink rooms or something, right?
Correct.
Or dot rooms, something?
Correct. And it's usually like a title company that will manage the whole transaction. The earnest money gets dropped off there. All the documents get, you know, drawn up through that escrow process. In Illinois, it's just not the case. Attorneys do most of the work.
So for the people listening that aren't from Chicago, you probably know that most closings in our states take like well under an hour. They're pretty quick things, a couple docs, you know, signing of a pen here and there, and it's done. Whereas Chicago can. How long do you think your longest closing's been?
Oh boy. I would say I had a closing that lasted from 9 to 5 one day. Just a
full work day.
I don't even think it funded till the next day.
Yeah. So what? Why is that? Do you know? Do you have any why we do it this way?
I mean, a lot of times we get bogged down with, again, with inspections and final walkthroughs, and a lot of times in new construction, for instance, my long closing, the developer did not agree to the punch list items, so we had to go back and forth
Right.
through that, and it just comes. The final walkthrough is usually our issue.
Yeah. Can a person not use an attorney?
You do not have to use an attorney.
Do you recommend somebody not using one?
I do not recommend that.
Okay. What's the like typical role you would play like on a buy side?
So on a buy side, it's actually much more personal. Usually I'll get the contract, I'll speak with the clients. After you guys have the inspection, we'll go through the inspection request, I'll draft up an attorney letter, I'll review that with the client. If it's a condo, I review condo documents, I review title. So
Right.
it's really like a mini commercial transaction, to be honest with you.
Okay. And like on the sell side, do you see the roles kind of differentiating? Or?
So sell side, I'm kind of in the driver's seat because I manage the whole transaction.
Okay.
There's less client involvement, I think, in the sell side. I'll draft closing documents, those will be pre-signed. So, and kind of just steer the whole transaction on the sell side.
So do you like being on the sell side or the buy side better?
I like the being in control on the sell side, and I like the personal nature of the buy side.
Okay, and how does the buyer seller relationship differ from clients from a legal standpoint when you navigate the process independently with let's say a real estate agent or more of a discount broker? Do you see a difference if maybe the agent's not as strong that you're working with? Is it more difficult for you?
It's a good agent is worth every penny because I find that on inspections and the agent's the one who's there. The attorney's never at the property. So while I could document and relay the client's concerns well, it's the agent who's on the ground, and a good agent is essential so that they could help the client navigate that process.
So that's something I've been trying to even teach guys. So John Paul here. John Paul, how long you been licensed here now?
Let's see, 4 months.
4 months, and you've used and talking about not only maybe, in my opinion, a stronger agent is going to make the process easier because it's all about expectation setting. I think if you set the right expectations from the forefront, it makes the whole transaction easier because one of the reasons why people's egos get in the way so much is that nobody told them one thing and then they just get this legal letter that reads like crap, okay? And people take offense to it because lawyers, let's face it, for the most part, minus Lisa, who is very personable, but for the most part, lawyers aren't very personable. And they send over this legal jargon that reads like crap, and somebody takes it personally. And a newer agent, maybe John Paul, not to pick on you, but I'm just saying, just like John Paul, maybe doesn't know to step in. And I think it's a big deal. And what I try to teach guys like this is you really want to make sure that you step in the transaction, get involved, and set the right expectations because it will make the process a little bit easier. And then there's less negotiations back and forth from your part, right?
It's absolutely right. If an agent sets up those expectations for a client, say, hey, you're going to get this massive list of don't freak out. This
Right.
is what's normal. Or, on the buy side, hey, let's not ask for, the whole, everything. Let's focus on what's important, not cosmetic issues. It's so important.
Because most of the time, even when we're talking about in Chicago, one of the biggest things that we come across is inspection items. I mean, most of the stuff is meaningless that people have lived with their entire lives, and it'll never ever affect them. And inspectors do make a lot of money by proving that there's bad stuff wrong with it. So they're like, why are you sending all this stuff when I've lived here and no, my house hasn't burnt down? So they take kind of offense for it. So, and kind of on the other side of maybe not using a stronger agent makes it more difficult. What about using a worse attorney, maybe an attorney that's not as experienced? You find that maybe a little bit more difficult because, and before you answer that, I can butt in because John Paul, you've had a bad experience with an attorney on one of your own properties, right?
I did, as of recent, yeah.
And how's that working out for you by using an attorney that hasn't done well?
It's not working out for me at all. So, yeah, I recommend using a good attorney. It's very important.
And your earnest money is where? So earnest money, guys, is money held in good faith.
Yeah.
It's also known as a deposit. And were you able to get that back on your transaction?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, you'll get a guy.
With Lisa's help, I'm working on it.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about is it more difficult for you in transactions when people aren't using a strong attorney?
Well, the worst thing I could hear is, oh, you know what? I'm just going to use my friend. He's a criminal lawyer, but he'll do this real estate transaction for me. I think it is essential that people, this is the biggest purchase of some people's lives.
Right.
It's essential that they spend the extra money and hire the residential real estate attorney who could help them navigate. it'll pay off so much in the end.
Well, the way I always say that, and that's a good point that you brought up, like, does it matter if you're a real estate attorney or a criminal attorney? And one of the best examples that I use is I say, well, if you're going to get brain surgery, right, you wouldn't get an orthopedic surgeon to do that, right?
Correct.
Or a guy that specializes in heart surgeries isn't the same guy you go to for Botox. I mean, yes, they both got, went through medical school, and I'm sure they somewhat know how to navigate, but they're probably not the one that you're going to go to when your life's at stake here. And it's not like it's a huge investment in the grand scheme of things when you're getting a real estate attorney. I mean, Lisa, on average, what would you say, and we can't say because we can't price fix, but like, what would you say that you personally charge on average for a buy side and a sell side transaction?
The fees range anywhere from like $250 to $800 depending on the transaction. A lot of times sell sides are less expensive than buy sides.
And why are sell sides less expensive?
In Illinois, attorneys do make money on the title policy that's issued because they do the title work. They're on the line for title liabilities should something have been missed, so they get compensated accordingly.
What first off, what is title? Because I don't know if everybody knows title, and it's probably one of the biggest things people ask me. It's a huge charge, and all they say is title. What does it mean?
So in Illinois, sellers of a property are responsible for providing buyers with an owner's policy of title insurance. The cost of the title policy, there's a rate card, and it depends greatly on your purchase price. And basically, it differs from other insurance in that it's a one-time fee. You pay this insurance one time. There's not, annual premiums.
Okay.
And it basically is insurance from things that happened in the past as opposed to things going forward. So you want to make sure that the chain of title is clean, that the property's been conveyed properly over the years, that prior mortgages have been paid off. So if anything came up that was not on title or which disrupts the chain of title, the title company would then step in, pay the cost of any litigation involved with fixing it.
Do you see that happen? Do you see people have gotten clean title insurance and then there's been a problem in the past?
I mean, if hopefully it should not be a problem if you do the search properly, but I have seen where there's been refinances over the years, and then there's mortgages that haven't been paid off that we have to go and clean up later.
So there's seller's title, right?
Correct.
And then is there a buyer title fee as well?
So seller pays for the owner's policy, and then if there's a lender involved, the lender will not close without a lender's policy. Buyer pays for that lender policy. That's not ensuring any buyer's interest, it's just ensuring the lender's.
So there's a seller's title and there's a buyer's title. Is that typical in other states?
Yes, but states differ in who pays for the cost of what. A lot of states, buyers will pay for the owner's policy rather than sellers.
Got it. And so in my experience, my understanding, like from these ink places that people go to in other cities to close at, it's actually a very lucrative business for a lot of real estate companies because the real estate companies make the money off the title.
Correct.
So on average, what does like a lawyer make off a title policy in Chicago?
They probably make about 80% off the cost of the title policy.
8 or 80?
80.
Okay. So it's a pretty decent profit if you're a seller's attorney more than a buyer's attorney. Do you think that's why some only specialize in sellers?
Yeah, it's more lucrative on the sales side. But again, you have to remember that if there's ever a claim down the line, it's the attorney's liability also. So it's not just the title company. Got
it. And kind of talking about title, one of the big things in Chicago that is different than other cities is taxes, right? I say most civilized cities do taxes a certain percentage. So once you close, let's use New York, for example. It was, I don't know where it's at today, but it was like 2% of the sales price. So what that means is that if you close at $200,000, which nothing sells for $200,000 in New York, but if it did, your taxes for next year would be 2%. Super easy to calculate, right? Chicago taxes. Is it that easy?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah. So Chicago, the biggest problem, and this is probably why most people need an attorney in Chicago, is to deal with taxes. Taxes in Chicago are in arrears.
And what does in arrears mean for people?
So everything is backwards.
Okay.
So for instance, 2018 taxes are not due until 2019. And taxes in Chicago come out twice a year. There's 2 installments. The first installment is always 55% of the previous tax year bill. And then it's the second installment where, any increase, any decrease goes into effect. So you don't really know what your tax bill is until the summer of the year after that bill happened.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes
sense.
perfect.
Makes a lot of sense.
You probably see this a lot in Italy, huh? Yeah.
Just as organized.
Yeah, just as organized. Now, why? Like, how do they formulate? Like, how do you determine what next year's tax is going to be? Is there like an easy formula, like square footage, which we don't measure in Chicago? But like, how do they come up with this?
No, there. To my knowledge, there really is no set formula. And the other thing I should mention is Chicago's on a triennial reassessment basis.
A what? I can't even say that.
I think you should triathlon.
Yeah, I think.
On a triennial reassessment basis. So actually, this year, 2018, is a reassessment year. So you have to be extra careful when you're doing tax prorations, because a lot of people come next summer are going to get a tax bill and be like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Taxes substantially increased.
So it seems like you need to have like some sort of college-educated degree solely in taxes to understand Chicago's taxes, because every 3 years we decide if they're going to go up, okay? And then after every sale, we just look at last year's tax, like, well, it should be that, and we'll ask for X amount of percentage more than last year and hope that that covers it. That's kind of what we're doing here, right?
Correct.
Is there a reason why we don't do a certain percentage? Is there some guy that told us we can't do it? Do you know anything why?
No, and I think you have to look at taxes on a case-by-case basis, and especially when it's a single-family home, I think it's better to prorate against the assessed value rather than the previous tax year bill.
So, like, do you think we'll ever change it to be like all the other cities in the world, or?
I highly doubt it.
And do you know why? I'm just curious.
I just think this is Chicago set in its ways. This is how they do it, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. But that's
so we're gonna do it because that's the way it was done before, and we should keep doing it that way. That makes, you know what? I think that makes a lot of sense. So, kind of talking about all these different things and legal pitfalls and stuff like that. What's the biggest legal pitfalls buyers and sellers can come across?
Okay, first of all, if you live in a condo in Chicago, people don't realize that this is another reason you need an attorney. There's a ton of condo document requirements. You have to, get approved by the association. You have to get waivers of rights of first refusal. If you have a loan on the place, you have to make sure, you have enough proceeds from the sale to pay off the loan.
Right.
And you have to get water certificates in Chicago, zoning certificates if it's a single family home or a 2 or 3 flat. And all these things take lead time, and if you didn't know, it could delay closing.
There seems just like I lost you after half of those, so it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on. So I guess maybe that's another reason why people would use attorneys, because if this is even your first or second purchase, most people have lives and then jobs to pay for this place, so it takes a lot to do it. So what do you think is the wildest legal situation you've encountered in residential real estate?
I had a situation a few weeks ago where, actually a few months ago, where a client failed to mention that they had a federal tax lien against them.
Oh.
So, and they just didn't think that it would have, attached to all their real estate. So when we went to sell and we got updated title and the lien was on there, I mean, you can't sell property without satisfying the lien. So that was a bit of a problem. And also divorce situations are always tricky. Like, people are on the same page up until the end when they double think themselves and you need both of their signatures,
or they see who's getting what and
Correct.
How much.
Correct.
Okay, so divorces may be a little tricky. Have you had a lot of problems with divorces in the past, or?
I've had a bunch of divorce situations, and I have had numerous problems. So I like to get things written down and everyone's on the same page, like weeks before closing, so that when we get to closing, there's not a holdout.
Have you ever seen somebody just like not want to show up and not sign any documents in a divorce?
Correct.
Wow. Okay. So what about like and talking about like using different attorneys, like what can buyers and sellers kind of like evaluate attorneys in terms of like whether they're like good or bad attorneys? Is there like a website, some like review stuff? I know like for real estate agents they can go on like Zillow or Yelp or some of these other sites. Is there like some sort of like system where people can compare like who's good and who's bad?
I think for attorneys, there are attorneys who are reviewed online, which obviously doesn't hurt to look at those reviews. I think asking your real estate agent, I think asking your lender, asking a friend who's been through the process, who's someone they trust and like working with, I think that's probably the best you can do. So,
but there's no like kind of, I guess like Zillow and Yelp are the biggest ones. I mean, do people do Yelp for attorneys? Is that a big thing? I think
some, but not nearly like it is.
Are you on Yelp?
I do not believe I am, no.
Okay, I think maybe you should get on it. I think, they said something like 80% of people believe reviews more than word of mouth, so may not be a bad thing to start getting involved with. So, and what are some of the biggest factors changing the legal industry in terms of like how attorneys are working with clients and like what type of works they do? Do you see a lot of changes happening in the industry, like in the residential side?
I think the technology with like the lenders and, when they changed the lending laws a couple years ago with the CD having to be mailed out a few days in advance in order to close on time, I tend to work a lot more closely with the lenders, making sure everyone's on the same page, and that's done.
Got it. Now, what about like technology? Like, since you've mentioned that, like, is it affecting like the attorney side? And give some context, like, like with Redfin and Compass is big now, and everybody's always talking technology. Zillow and all these other sites have kind of like played such a huge role in the real estate world, like on the buy-sell side. What about on the legal side? You see any websites or any new technology that's really changing the way you guys operate?
No, I do not, to answer that. I think that with email and everyone being in like a 24/7 world, it moves a lot faster, and
So you're not using fax as much? No? John Paul likes the fax a lot. John Paul's always like asking me to fax things. I said, John Paul, this is not Sicily. But
I do use my e-fax, I will say, but
okay.
I'll always have that. But just things are very constant.
What do you run into attorneys that are still kind of, because I feel like attorneys are kind of like real estate in general. They're always like a little bit behind on technology. Do you run into a lot of old school attorneys that will only fax?
I do, and I can't stand it, to be honest with you, but I do have my fax set up so it comes to my email.
Okay.
For that situation.
Okay. Yeah.
So for me, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. What about social media? Like, do you use social media in your business at all? Are you seeing some sort of like lawyers using? Because I know like the NAR and the National Association of Realtors have actually created new laws for realtors because they want us to make sure that we use the fair housing logo and things on it. Do you see social media playing a role in the legal world at all? And like, is there any laws for like how you guys promote yourselves on social media?
There's not. I don't think lawyers use social media to the extent realtors do. For instance, in the law world, I can't really refer to myself as a real estate attorney, even though that's what I specialize in. I can't really brand myself that way. It's just not allowed. I'm not entirely sure why, but I've learned that.
Okay. But no other, like, are you using social media in your own business?
I do not use social media.
And is there a reason why? I mean, you're on this podcast here. We can share it on it.
I mean, after this, I might have to start doing that. But no real reason. I'm not very good at it, but I'll have to learn.
Well, you have to start. Content is king. The more you post, the more it'll get out there, the way these algorithms work and things like that. So, like, we're going to give you a homework assignment today, and that is to try to post more on Instagram and Facebook and things of that nature. What about, like, and talking to that, do you have one platform? If you could only choose one, what's your favorite social media?
I'm so old school. I still probably use Facebook the most. I'm getting into Instagram, though.
The gram is big, but I'll tell you, they do say that Facebook is mostly used by older users.
That's great.
And I'm not saying that as a pun, but, I think it's a good way to establish yourself and your brand for some of the older clientele who tend to make bigger purchases, which I would think would be more lucrative for you. And then what about deals? Like, how many deals on average are you doing a year?
Oh, I think, a few hundred, a lot. Volume's high, yes.
More or less than 200?
More.
Wow. So do you think you're doing like maybe a deal a day?
I think it probably averages out to that. Yes.
That's great volume, man. And where were you 5 years ago?
5 years ago, I was just starting my residential real estate practice.
And how do you think you were able to build it so much where you're doing a deal a day?
All referrals, word of mouth. I mean, I've never advertised, but and my old law firm has been a huge source of business for me.
Do you have like a best advice for like a lot of these, like, because real estate's been so sexy lately with how good the market's been. Do you have a best advice for a young attorney that's starting out that wants to get into real estate? Like, what would they do first?
I mean, I think they should network and talk to other attorneys, and you never know the kind of people. I mean, I became a real estate attorney totally by chance because of people I met at a gathering when I was working. I always wanted to be a litigator, I thought, and that quickly changed. So I just network and talk to as many people as you can. Okay,
and then every guest, the co-host asks what we call the Fast Five, which are 5 questions. And John Paul's going to ask you these 5 questions.
All right. You want me to fax them to you? All right. So, which is worse, making a mistake or not trying at all?
Not trying.
I knew that one. Do you love to win or hate to lose?
I love to win.
And why?
Is that the right answer?
So, like, there's a corporate a standing on this of like which one's right and which one's wrong. I want to know, why do you like to win more than hating to lose?
Don't get me wrong. I hate to lose as well. Just the feeling of winning is so gratifying.
Technically, that's wanting to win is the right answer.
Oh, I passed.
Yeah. Otherwise, it sounds like you're a sore loser, right? If it's like,
I hate to
lose.
I hate.
So what's your answer?
I hate to lose. I absolutely hate to lose.
But so you don't
like
to
winning
win?
is great. Like I love to win. Like it's good. It happens. But like the loss, I hate more. It's hard to describe.
So the first question, you probably don't like to make mistakes either then.
No, never.
Okay, got it.
So
So what's your favorite quote and why?
You never regret something that you didn't say.
nice.
That's like the first question. If you retired tomorrow and wanted to start a wildly different career, what would you do?
I'd be a broadcast journalist. I've always wanted to be on the news.
And here you are on this famous podcast.
This is as close to
oh my gosh.
Wow.
Dream come true. Check.
Thank you, Matt and John Paul.
That's funny. What makes you Chicago?
Okay, this is a tricky one. I love everything about the city. I live a few blocks away from here. I love walking. I love Chicago. I love the lake. I love the restaurants. I love everything.
And you would say that Chicago's better than, like, let's say, like, that small little city in New York, right?
What city? I haven't heard of
exactly,
that.
Exactly. So, and where can people find you, Lisa? And what would you want to plug today?
So my law firm is called Ford Law Offices. You can find me at
How do you spell that?
FORDE.
Okay.
So the website's FORDELLP.com.
Okay. So make sure to tune into our next episode and subscribe to our podcast. Thanks for listening to the Matt Laricy Project.